Welcome to the Intro to Space Utilization Analytics for Workplaces. Today, we are going to talk about space utilization technology and how they impact the workplace. Just going to get started here. My name is Ari Kepnes. I am the Director of Market Research at Density. And I'm joined here today by Rob Grazioli, who is the Head of Product Design. And just a few things about Density. We will first begin by talking about who we are here at Density, the importance of utilization data. And then Rob is going to share with us a presentation on how the analytics work in practice for some of our largest clients and in the industry. And then we're going to take your questions. On that note, there's a Q&A at the bottom of your screen, at the top of your screen. You should see a folder that says Q&A, and you can leave questions as we're going through. So if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them. You can do so anonymously or not. And then on that note, again, you can always follow up. We will be sharing a copy of this presentation in video form. But if you do stick for the whole thing, we will be offering everyone who meets the criteria a $20 gift card to Amazon. So thank you in advance for taking the time out of your day. As a token of appreciation, we will be sending those along as well. So thanks for taking the time to talk with us here at Density. So Density, we were founded in 2014. Our team is from Microsoft, Apple, SAP, and we are a connected platform. We are the new data platform for the connected workplace. And Density's people counting technology enables organizations to efficiently measure their two largest assets, people and the workplace. So real estate and the people that real estate or corporate real estate houses. And we believe that we are entering kind of a new paradigm of understanding how is a workplace or real estate performing in terms of how is it serving the people who use it. And because of that, our approach is to measure how people use space. And some of the examples of how this is kind of talked about in practice is that you can actually understand how spaces are used and then create better decisions from it. So we help provide clarity and transparency to some of the largest workplace and corporate real estate decisions with data. So that's kind of at a high level here. And I'm going to start off by this metaphor of Goldilocks and the three bears. So Goldilocks is kind of this unknown hero and an interesting lesson because she teaches us that in order to actually find the right fit, right? So she has 3 different beds that she goes and tries, and she has 3 different porridges, and she finally arrives at the right one. There's a trial and error, but there's also immediate feedback between her and her environment that allows her to finally optimize for the space that she needs or the thing that she needs. And then that's a lesson for where we're moving with workplace experience. As we try and serve our employees better and better, there needs to be this feedback between the place and the people who use it. So we're entering kind of in that. But it's also an empathic tale that it's not so easy, right? So as everyone here who works in workplace or in corporate real estate can attest to, it seems like it is really hard to get it right, to allocate the right space and make everyone happy. And kind of her story is a sharing of one way to do that, and it isn't always easy, and that she had to try all these different things. So in that framework of feedback between us and the built environment, we can really think about this theme of balancing both efficiency and experience. And so when we say things like workplace experience, which is very much in vogue now, and there's this hospitality almost mindset today that's been ushered into the world of workplace, there's also on the other side, there's this idea of cost efficiency, and that you don't want to spend on frivolous things or things that aren't going to be helping people do their best work. So in order to kind of balance the experience with efficiency as a mindset, that balancing act really requires an understanding of how spaces are used. And the thing is that we haven't really done this well historically. So if we look at the trends of workplace design, it's almost this pendulum swing between ways of, in some ways, kind of giving people what they want, but then it kind of get executed in a way that's all about efficiency. So I would argue that, the cubicle was actually invented as a way, and Herman Miller in 1967 as the Action Office, to have these rearrangeable kind of modular offices. But then in execution, it moved from experience to just efficiency of how can we cram people in for the most kind of efficient way possible. And the same thing happened with open offices, and is happening in the ways when it's not done correctly, which is, it's designed so that people have a variety of spaces, that they don't just get stuck in the open office to do everything, but they have a variety of different places that they can go for focus work, for collaboration. But when it becomes just about efficiency and not experience, that is when the balancing act is kind of messed up in that way. And so what we've seen now is that space utilization is the key metric for balancing those conflicting needs of experience and efficiency. And Gensler put out a study. They found that 83% of CRE executives see space utilization as a top metric for decision making. So what does it actually provide? Well, it allows you to do the balancing act in a way that both helps reduce costs. So if you know kind of how underutilized space is seen across your portfolio, you can kind of reduce areas in that way. You can simplify space planning because you can gain kind of the central way of thinking about what you need. And then you can also validate needs. And we're seeing that kind of the leaders in the space are even going so much as almost testing different spaces and doing that kind of feedback loop between people and how they use it. So some of the big problems today with utilization, and again, we're just talking at a high level of how is a building used versus how it's intended or by how many people over the course of a day. And we're seeing both underutilization and unmet needs, which is a sign of both efficiency and experience being offset. So on one hand, we're seeing things like 40% of corporate real estate is empty but paid for. 89% of executives are not satisfied with how they're using the space. But on the experience side, there's workplaces there where people don't feel like, hey, this workplace is making me happy, and that they're actually looking for places that can do that. So it's out of sync. So the hope here is that to bring it all together, if you understand how employees are using your space, and you understand on a square foot level, but also on an employee level, then you can start to address those concerns of underutilization, of where are we wasting space, and unmet needs. And this is under the guise of huge shifts in the way that people are working. So I will share now a moment here with Rob. And Rob, if you want to kind of walk us through what this actually means in practice.
Absolutely. Thanks, Ari. So let me just share my presentation here. All right, as Ari said, people count can sort of apply to many different levels of a space. So I'm going to walk you through a couple examples that some of our customers have used people count for, and sort of climb up the ladder of space utilization, starting with small space allocation needs, moving up to higher traffic spaces where you can manage staffing and more complex spaces, then all the way up to the highest level. And I'll give you a sneak preview of an application that we're developing for some higher level portfolio management. Okay, so this particular customer had a new agile team sort of taking over old space. What they actually did was take old single person offices and just assign those spaces to these teams, sort of a one size fits all approach. And then almost immediately, those teams were requesting more space. But the organization had a mandate on the amount of square feet that they were applying to people, and there really wasn't room for that. So in order to get that space, because I think everybody's goal is to get people the space that they really need, they needed to conduct a study. So they used this for the study, and a lot of the spaces looked okay. Like there's plenty of use throughout the day. You saw your peaks. In the morning, maybe there was a recurring stand-up meeting, but then a lot of the other spaces sort of looked like this, where you saw very low utilization metrics, although they were being used, right? So they had people in them throughout a large portion of the day, but they weren't maximizing the size of that particular space. So what they wound up doing, instead of actually sort of relocating the team or or changing the policy for that team, they actually took 3 of those rooms, cut them all in half, and changed the function of those rooms. So again, the one size fits all approach, while convenient, really wasn't giving those teams the kind of space that they needed. So having this kind of data allows you to make better decisions for your team, and also save space and save time. A separate customer with a larger space, they actually have a cafeteria in there, in one of their campuses, or many of their campuses, I should say. But this is a higher traffic space, so really they're looking at visits. And they found that they were having a terrible issue with food waste, and were planning on the same amount of people showing up every single day. What they quickly found is that less people showed up on Friday. Something like 20% of people actually weren't even coming to the office, period, and therefore definitely not at lunch. And what's cool, we were also able to then predict and into the next week, with a reasonable amount of accuracy as to what that kind of attendance could be, which could help them plan better. And then we were also working with them to actually expose this data to the employees themselves, which allows them to sort of reduce the peaks and valleys over the course of the day, plan better, lower costs, and staff more appropriately. And then lastly, I'll switch over to a product we have in beta right now. We're working with a select few customers, but this allows people to sort of look at their portfolio at a much higher level. So sort of go down to different buildings, different areas, compare how they're performing against each other based on what those allocations are. Sort of look at things at a glance, and then also factor in geography, and also giving them a unified score, a way to evaluate these spaces equally, given their different functions. So if you guys are interested in sort of learning more about this, please feel free to reach out directly. We'd be happy to go through you and potentially get you started in beta. That's it for me, Ari.
Great. So I'm going to now share my screen here. Let's do this, and we'll get started. So I think just to break down what we've been talking about is Rob kind of brought us through on a room level. How do you actually understand how we're using the space? So it's not so much as just like, let's just get rid of all the space, but how can we, with the data that we know of how people are using the space, make those spaces actually better for the function of them? And I think that was really cool to see, both from a room perspective, but also at a high level on a whole portfolio level. And then the cafe example is also kind of a really interesting testament to the real-time applications. But the thing is with all of this is that to actually understand how are people using space, you have to understand how people are using space in a way that's accurate and is measuring where they are in a building in a way that you can actually derive value from it. But to do that, it's a very big challenge because people are weird. They do things like hide behind hinges. They walk in different directions. They carry objects. So even though it's 2019, we're just getting to a point where we can just at a high level understand how many people are in this room versus that room right now. How are they kind of using the space over time, and make some predictions. So to do that with accuracy and granularity, our company and our approach has developed this people counting technology. So what we do is we actually create these depth kind of we have these depth units that get installed above every doorway or every threshold that we want to measure. And then as people are entering and exiting, we're measuring in real time how many people are in the space. So this is a reflection of what the algorithm is seeing as 4 people are leaving the space in real time. And as you can see there, it's able to discern human movement without knowing who they are, which is really the holy grail of workplace analytics, because you have to be able to get accurate data, but there is a shift away from Big Brother and being able to kind of measure how many people are in a space, but without necessarily collecting personally identifiable information. So that's kind of our approach. So we've developed at a high level a device, a sensor that looks like this, that goes above every room or above an area that you want to measure, and it connects via our analytics tool so you can understand in real time. Now, what's kind of interesting about this too, and where kind of this is all moving, is that all of the workplace tools, right, need to be able to have a base understanding of how many people are in a space. It's that simple. And so our approach is that whatever workplace analytics tool you're using, of course, you can use the analytics and derive insights in the way that Rob showed us, but you can also kind of integrate into the systems you already use to make those systems more valuable to you. And I would say, from a high level, where we're seeing this more and more is that in real time, the employees themselves are using applications that integrate with people count data, like how busy is the cafeteria, how many people are in that gym amenity system that I want to use. So that's really where the conversation is going. But our approach is to collect anonymous, accurate, and real-time analytics that aren't going to just be historical space utilization, but it's about space utilization right now and what you can do with it. So the takeaways here that I want to just kind of frame here for us is we've gone pretty deep into the minutia of how do you optimize a space. We've talked about at a high level, why is space utilization important? And there's almost like this Goldilocks balancing act between understanding feedback between the people and the buildings themselves. But at the end of the day, it's really about a data-driven approach. I was at one of the largest Silicon Valley tech companies last week, and I was just amazed at not that they were collecting the space utilization data, which they were, and they were using us to collect that data, but they were really taking a data-driven approach to so many of their largest decisions. So they were saying, okay, well, we're using this space in this way. Is it performing the way we wanted it to? Can we test this conference room in the way that we thought? Is it using, are people using it the way we intended? And it's really a shift to a data-driven mindset. And that was what's really been impressive to see from some of our largest clients. And then the second is to start with a discrete project. So, we've been talking very much about all of these different ways and how they all tie together, space utilization data. But the question is, what I've really been impressed by when I talk to workplace teams is they usually have a few hypotheses, like we need more conference rooms, or we need different types of conference rooms, or maybe we should have, more cafe spaces. They have hypotheses already, and the data isn't going to just tell you all of the hypotheses you should have, but they'll use space utilization analytics, both in real time and over time, to validate. And so the message there is to start with a project or a hunch that you already have. And then the last thing is that people are not ones and zeros. So there's really been a shift today with IoT sensors and thinking about, data everywhere and that we need to collect data. But at the end of the day, these are humans. These are people that are using your space. And we do have to remember this kind of hospitality mindset that is now workplace, which is that it's not enough just to know that 5 people are in a room, but you can start to understand, okay, well, how are they using that space? And was it being used the way we thought they would? And also, supplementing it with actual conversations with people. That's what I've found from some of our largest Fortune 500 companies. They have a really rigorous set of these dialogues too. So that's going to be it for today. We're going to take questions. We were able to wrap up in just 18 minutes there. So I will address some of these questions here that we have coming in. And again, it's at the bottom of your screen at the top where it says Q&A. So how does the device integrate with other systems and tools? So the way that it works is that we have these devices that get installed in the places that you want to measure. And then they're almost like a computer above every doorway or every threshold. So they're always collecting data of how many people are entering and exiting in real time. And then those, if you think about it, that's like a +1 or -1. Someone just came in, someone just left. And those +1, -1, that data feed plugs into the cloud that can then have an API or have a way of talking to all your other systems. So it depends on what systems you use, and I'm making it sound a little bit more complicated, but we can have it integrate through different languages that talk to each other so that they're already native into the systems that you use. Okay, how long are you keeping these in place? And regarding predictive analytics, how is that being used or modeled? Great questions. So in terms of how long keeping in place, what we found is, there is a history of utilization studies and having people go around with clipboards and counting at any point Maybe it happens once every year. Like, how are we using the space? And let's just count and see what they're doing. And those are utilization studies. And in many ways, it is kind of crazy that in 2019 that still exists, because it's literally just people and clipboards. But for those type of studies, that is something that you maybe would do, just over a few days. But what we're seeing is actually that the clients that use us for space utilization also end up kind of having these installed permanently and integrate into their meeting room systems or other systems, and then it becomes a part of enriching their whole kind of ecosystem. So if you want to know specifically about how to use it for space utilization, the questions would be, first, what you're trying to test, and then what are the applications. And then for predictive analytics, great question here. How is that being used or modeled? So we're collecting all the time the data about how a specific room is used, or a cafe or a building. And then we can say, okay, here's how it's being used now. And then over time and again, this is the value of keeping these in for as a kind of infrastructure. Then you can actually say, okay, here's all of the Fridays that have ever happened, and they tend to be 25% lower attendance than anything else. And so that's how we're able to do that. And we do that directly in our dashboard. Okay. And then in terms of kind of how are people using the spaces, how do we understand that? So we have an approach where we're not actually collecting personally identifiable information, which allows us to scale in large institutions. And the way that we kind of measure how is a space being used is we can say, okay, well, one person is here for this amount of time, and then you can derive inferences around either that solo work or things like that. So if you were having a conference room, you could have one device in that conference room, and then you would see, okay, someone has been here all day. They're not using that conference room in the way that we've saw. It's intended for 12 people, but it tends to get used 20% of the time by one person. And that's an actual example of an actual client. They had that. And so they were able to then have these other phone booth areas and other solo areas for focus work. And I do write about this too. So if you're interested in that, we have a blog that explains how that happens. And can you A/B test environments and furniture? That's a great question here. So I said before that some of our most kind of impressive clients are using some of the data to be data informed with their hypotheses. And the way that they do that is through kind of an A/B test mindset. So for those of you who don't know this, that means, hey, we're gonna put this space, allocate it in this way, or put these type of soft seating in it, and then we're gonna see how that changes behavior, if it's being booked differently or used differently, and then we can adjust accordingly. And that's where we're all headed. And that's in many ways, for me, fascinating, because it's almost like taking a digital or a product-centered mindset into the world of workplace, with a way of actually using that feedback to make a better product. Okay. And I'm in the Netherlands. We have a question from someone here. Do you have a partner in Europe? Okay, so we actually do have a capability to be expanding globally. We are a relatively new company, but because we have developed the hardware ourselves and kind of all of the software that goes along with it, we've been able to kind of usher in really quickly a way of distributing globally. So if you are outside the US, that has not been a barrier for us. We would just want to understand your specific needs, and hopefully we can help. So I think we are all wrapped up here. And I just wanted to, again, thank everyone for your time. You could be doing anything, but you made the time for us. And then the second thing I would love to say is just please feel free to follow up. And if you have any questions about space utilization or assessing technology or feeling overwhelmed or whatever it is, we want to be helpful. So you can email us. My email is there below, but please keep in touch. And I wish you all a great rest of your day. So thanks so much. And we will see you at the next webinar, hopefully.